When my parents were growing up in Sweden, my grandmother kept a deep pantry. Not because she was extreme or anxious, she was the most calm, practical woman I have ever known, but because she understood that the world is unpredictable and that the people who eat well during difficult times are the ones who planned quietly before things got difficult. I used to think that was a generational habit that did not apply anymore. I do not think that now. My name is Sophia, and I want to share something with you that I think every family needs to understand right now. On the 28th of February 2026, Israel and the United States launched airstrikes on Iran. Within days, Iran effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow shipping channel through which 20% of the world's oil and gas travels, and through which 30 to 50% of globally traded fertilizer passes. The conflict has now been running for over a month with no resolution in sight. And the consequences for what sits on supermarket shelves across the world over the coming months are already in motion, not as possibilities, but as documented supply chain disruptions that food industry analysts, agricultural bodies, and governments are actively managing right now. I want to talk about 25 specific groceries that are going to be affected unavailable, significantly reduced, or so much more expensive that many families will effectively stop buying them. And I want to talk about why this matters from a health perspective, specifically for people over 50. For older adults managing blood pressure, blood sugar, joint health, bone density, and immune function, what you can no longer find or afford at the supermarket is not just an inconvenience. It is a health variable that deserves to be taken seriously and planned for. A quick note before we start. Everything I share here comes from published reporting, agricultural research, and documented supply chain analysis. I am not here to alarm you. I am here to give you useful, honest information so you can make thoughtful decisions before the gaps become visible on the shelves. That is always the goal of this channel. Let us get into it. Number one, olive oil. This one was already under pressure before the conflict began. The Mediterranean olive harvest experienced back to back drought years across Spain, Italy, and Greece, the three countries that produce the vast majority of the world's supply. Now add surging freight costs as fuel prices spike from the Strait of Hormuz closure, and the olive oil that is available becomes significantly more expensive to ship anywhere in the world. For people over 50, extra virgin olive oil is one of the most evidence supported dietary fats for cardiovascular health. The Mediterranean diet research that underpins much of what we know about heart disease prevention in older adults runs largely on olive oil. If your budget is going to push you away from it, buying at current pricing is worth doing now. Number two, wheat flour and bread. Nearly half of the world's traded urea, the most widely used nitrogen fertilizer, originates in Gulf countries and travels through the Strait of Hormuz. Urea prices have already surged 60% above where they were 12 months ago. Wheat is one of the most fertilizer-dependent staple crops globally. Commonwealth Bank researchers have specifically warned that a sustained strait closure will create a significant fertilizer shortage that directly changes what farmers can afford to plant. The wheat that becomes flour, that becomes the bread on your shelf, is already part of a supply chain under compounding pressure. Number three, rice. This one is less obvious, but the supply chain vulnerability is significant. India accounts for approximately 25% of global rice exports. Indian rice production is heavily dependent on urea fertilizer, much of which comes from the Gulf. As urea prices surge and availability tightens, the cost of producing and exporting rice increases, and that cost flows through to retail pricing worldwide. For older adults who rely on rice as a digestible, easy to prepare staple, particularly those with sensitive digestive systems, this is a category worth having on hand at current prices. Number four, dairy products, milk, cheese, yogurt, and butter. Industry analysts have specifically documented that the global dairy sector is under significant pressure from the Iran conflict. Higher energy costs increase the cost of refrigeration, transport, and processing across the entire dairy supply chain. Full-fat dairy is one of the most important sources of calcium, vitamin D, vitamin B12, and fat-soluble vitamins for people over 50. Disruption to supply or significant price increases matter directly for bone density and neurological health in the age group this channel is built for. Number five, eggs. Global egg supply was already under pressure from avian influenza outbreaks that have culled significant portions of laying flocks across multiple countries over the past 18 months. The fuel crisis compounds this because transporting laying hens, feed grain, and eggs all depend on diesel supply that is now restricted or significantly more expensive almost everywhere. For older adults, eggs are one of the most nutritionally complete, affordable, and easily prepared protein sources available. Losing reliable access to them at an affordable price creates a genuine dietary gap. Number 6, beef and lamb. The fuel costs layered onto existing supply chain pressure means that the cost of moving livestock from farms to processing facilities and from facilities to retail is escalating on both ends. Both. The National Farmers Federation has cited impacts on cattle movement as one of the immediate documented consequences. Red meat is a significant source of B12, zinc, iron, and complete protein for older adults' nutrients that become harder to obtain from plant sources alone as absorption efficiency declines with age. Number 7, fresh tropical fruits. Many tropical fruit-producing regions were already dealing with weather-related disruptions before the fuel crisis added a freight cost layer on top. For older adults, tropical fruits provide vitamin C, potassium, and digestive enzymes that support immune function and gut health. Supply pressure on these categories means making considered substitutions with whatever local seasonal fruit is available, which is not always straightforward for people with limited mobility or restricted access. Number 8, cooking oils, canola, sunflower, and vegetable oils. Heavy, liquid, requiring carefully managed transport cooking oils sit in the category that supply chain analysts specifically identified as most exposed to the current freight cost surge. For older adults who cook daily from scratch, cooking oil is not optional. It is the medium through which most home cooking happens. Number 9, pasta, directly wheat dependent, meaning it carries all the fertilizer and supply chain vulnerability of wheat flour, plus the plastic packaging cost pressure that food industry analysts have flagged as an immediate consequence of the Iran conflict. Petrochemical supply disruption is spiking plastic packaging prices globally. Pasta is one of the most practical, affordable, long shelf life staples for families worldwide. It is also genuinely important for older adults who need easy to prepare carbohydrates that do not require complex cooking. Number 10, raisins and dried fruits. Food industry analysts ran a specific analysis in March 2026 documenting that the global trade behind raisins is far more concentrated than most consumers realize, and that the Iran conflict is directly exposing that fragility. Dried fruits are widely used by older adults, easy to eat, long shelf life, no preparation required, and a meaningful source of fiber, potassium, and iron. Number 11 and 12, tea and instant coffee. China is the world's dominant tea producer and a major coffee processing country. Shipping cost increases apply broadly across the routes serving global beverage supply. Tea contains L-theanine and polyphenols with documented cardiovascular and cognitive benefits. For many older adults, the daily ritual of tea or coffee also carries measurable psychological benefit that should not be underestimated. Both categories face pricing and availability pressure in the months ahead. Number 13, garlic and onions. China is a dominant global supplier of garlic and processed onion products. Shipping costs from China are rising with freight disruption. For older adults who cook from scratch, garlic and onions are foundational nutritional and flavor ingredients. Garlic specifically has well-documented antimicrobial and cardiovascular properties that make it more than a cooking ingredient. Number 14, soy products, tofu, tempeh, soy milk, and edamame. Brazil accounts for nearly 60% of global soybean exports. Brazilian agricultural production is heavily fertilizer dependent, and with urea prices up 60% and availability tightening, the cost of producing and exporting soybeans is rising sharply. For older adults following plant-based diets, or those managing cholesterol through dietary means, soy protein is one of the most accessible and evidence-supported plant protein sources available. Number 15, sugar and confectionery. Brazil also dominates global sugar exports. The same fertilizer and freight cost pressure affecting Brazilian soybeans applies to Brazilian sugar. Food industry analysts documented that the confectionery sector is among the first food categories to feel the strain from the Iran conflict, both through ingredient costs and through plastic packaging price spikes. Number 16, corn and corn based products, cornmeal, corn flour, and corn based cereals. Brazil is a major corn exporter. The fertilizer vulnerability applies here as directly as it does to Brazilian soy and sugar. Corn based products are widely used by older adults managing gluten sensitivity or seeking alternatives to wheat based staples. If you are finding this genuinely useful and you want to keep receiving this kind of clear, practical information for yourself or someone you care for, please subscribe to my channel, Sophia Lindstrom, right now. I put this kind of research together every week, and I would love for you to be part of this community. It only takes a second. Number 17, frozen vegetables. Supply chain analysts specifically named frozen food as among the most exposed categories to the fuel driven freight cost increase because frozen products require refrigerated transport from processing all the way to the shelf. And every kilometer of that cold chain runs on diesel or electricity generated from fuel. Frozen vegetables are one of the most practically important food categories for older adults living alone or with limited cooking capacity. Supply pressure here has real dietary consequences for people who depend on them. Number 18, ready meals and convenience foods, also specifically named by analysts as among the most exposed grocery categories. Ready meals are not a nutritional ideal, but for older adults managing fatigue, limited mobility, cognitive decline, or caregiver burnout, they are a genuinely important dietary safety net. When they become too expensive, the alternative is often not a freshly cooked, balanced meal. It is less food or lower quality food. Number 19, canned fish tuna, salmon, sardines, and mackerel. Canned fish is one of the most nutritionally complete, affordable, and accessible protein sources for older adults. It provides omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin D, B12, and calcium from edible bones in a single product that requires no cooking and no cold chain. The packaging crisis, plastic packaging prices spiking from petrochemical supply disruption, applies directly to canned goods. Add the fuel cost increase affecting fishing vessel operations and the cold chain, and this category faces compounding pressure. Number 20, fresh seafood. Fishing vessels run on fuel. The cold chain that brings fresh fish from the ocean to the display case runs on fuel at every stage. With fuel costs rising significantly worldwide, fresh seafood supply and pricing is directly and immediately affected. For older adults relying on fresh fish as a primary omega-3 source, the canned alternatives become more important to have on hand. Number 21, fresh tomatoes, capsicums, and cucumbers. These crops are among the most fertilizer-intensive fresh vegetables in commercial production. As urea prices surge and fertilizer availability tightens, the cost of growing these crops rises directly. They are also among the heaviest and most transport cost-sensitive fresh produce items. For older adults, these vegetables are meaningful sources of vitamin C, lycopene, and potassium, each supporting cardiovascular health, skin integrity, and kidney function. Number 22, avocados. Major avocado-producing countries face freight cost increases from the global shipping disruption tied to the Strait closure. For older adults following heart-healthy eating patterns, avocados are one of the few whole food sources of monounsaturated fat in a convenient, no cooking required format. As import pricing rises, this will move from an everyday item to an occasional one for many families on fixed incomes. Number 23, packaged cereals and muesli. Wheat, oat, and corn dependent, packaged in plastic and cardboard, whose costs are rising from petrochemical disruption, transported in bulk loads, directly affected by freight cost increases. Packaged cereals are a morning staple for the majority of adults over 50 worldwide. For older adults with limited appetite or reduced cooking capacity, they are genuinely important calorie and fiber delivery vehicles. Number 24, cooking sauces and condiments, pasta sauces, curry pastes, stock, and soy sauce. These products are manufactured with ingredients sourced globally, packaged in plastic or glass whose prices are rising, and transported across supply chains under the same freight cost pressure as every other category on this list. For older adults cooking for one or two people, Condiments and sauces are one of the most practical tools for making simple meals interesting and varied enough to maintain dietary compliance over time. Meal monotony is a documented driver of poor nutritional intake in older adults living alone. These products deserve to be treated as health relevant, not just a cooking convenience. Number 25, bottled water in large format containers. Plastic bottle prices are rising directly from the petrochemical supply disruption. In areas where local infrastructure is under pressure, the logistics of maintaining water delivery face genuine challenges. For older adults with compromised kidney function or on medications requiring high fluid intake, reliable access to clean drinking water is not a comfort preference. It is a clinical requirement. Here is the thread that runs through all 25 of these categories. The conflict has simultaneously disrupted the fuel supply that moves food through supply chains and the fertilizer supply that enables food to be grown in the first place. Those are the two foundational inputs of the modern food system: energy and nitrogen. When both are constrained at the same time, the consequences move through every food category in a specific and predictable sequence. First, prices rise, then specific formats and brands disappear from shelves, then supply becomes intermittent. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization has estimated a 3-month window before risks escalate significantly and affect global planting decisions for 2026 and beyond. What this means practically for older adults and their families is not panic. It is not clearing shelves. It means looking at the 25 categories on this list, identifying the ones your household depends on most for nutritional reasons, and making thoughtful decisions over the next 2 to 3 weeks while supply is still normal and pricing is still relatively stable. For most families, buying an extra 2 to 4 weeks of the non perishable items on this list adds up to a modest investment that creates a meaningful nutritional buffer. That is not extreme. That is exactly the kind of quiet, practical planning my grandmother would have recognized. Please subscribe to my channel, Sophia Lindstrom, so you continue to get this kind of clear, honest information as the situation develops. Share this with an adult child, a sibling, or a friend who may not have seen the full picture laid out clearly. And tell me in the comments which of these 25 items are you most concerned about for your own household? I read every comment, and I will address the most common ones in an upcoming video. Take care of yourselves. I will see you next time.